Hello my treasures, it's time for some more Festival of Legend cards to be revealed. So let's begin with the first Death Knight cards of the set. First one being a Mosh Pit, which is going to be a new location that costs 2, that has 2 durability, that spends 3 corpses to give a friendly minion a reborn. And much like the other location for Death Knights, it does not require any schools of runes, which means you can use it in any Death Knight deck, which means there are quite a few really good targets. For example, you could use it on combination with Frost Whisper, so you can get 2 for Death Rattles, or you could use it in combination with Sindragosa in order to get 2 more waves of adds that are going to freeze your opponent's minions. So weirdly, there aren't actually that many Death Rattles in the Death Knight class. There are, however, quite a few end of turn effects that you could easily abuse with this card. Though if we are going to be talking about very powerful Death Rattles that you would want to duplicate, the next minion will unleash your Inner Rage, which is Cage Head, a 8 cost 5 attack, 1 HP undead minion that requires 2 unholy runes. Death Rattle, summon a 9/9 Light Boar with Charge and Taunt. This is the perfect card for the previous card and some of the later cards that we will be going over. The only downside about this card is the fact that it costs 2 unholy runes to actually run it in your deck, so you can't use it in some type of rainbow deck, which in theory would fit a lot better than a full unholy team in my opinion. However, it does introduce the mechanic of Death Rattles to Death Knights, at least with a very good target. If you have ways to actually duplicate this Death Rattle and not rely on other Death Rattles within your deck, this card could be incredibly playable. Given the next card that we will be going over, you can do such a thing. Death Growl is a 1 cost unholy spell where you choose a 1 minion, spread its Death Rattle to adjacent minions. So this in combination with the previous card would in theory give you 27 worth of stats on a bunch of boars. And if you can easily get rid of all of these minions using think like Corpse Explosion or some other cards where you can just target your own minions, then this could be incredibly powerful. You could maybe use this in combination with your hero power in order to just make a 1/1 instantly turn into a 9/9. There's quite a few possibilities with a card like this, though Death Knight again is missing a lot of really powerful Death Rattles that you would expect out of the class, and maybe we will be seeing some other really good targets out of Cage Head. Either way, if you have a consistent way to get to Cage Head within a Death Knight deck, such as randomly generating additional copies, or even being able to search for him within the deck, given his high cost, you could easily use it in combination with Talion, though that might hurt the consistency factor of the next card, which is going to be Bone Shredder, a 5 cost 5 attack, 4 HP undead minion that requires 1 unholy rune, Battlecry, spend 5 corpses to trigger and gain the Death Rattle of a random friendly minion that died this game. So if you only have Cage Head in rotation, this is going to automatically guarantee you at least 1 9/9 board, which could in theory finish off your opponent. The nice thing to mention about all these cards in particular is the 9/9 board is basically a little bit of a harder King Crush that you can just get multiple times. If you have cards to revive undead minions within a Death Knight where you could maybe use these cards in combination with, then you could set up a very powerful board with a bunch of charges. If you also have things like Unholy Frenzy, which buff up your entire board for a few corpses, discounted some way, you could in theory OTK your opponent between this card and some of the previous cards using Cage's Head. Nice thing about introducing more Death Rattles to the Death Knight class, it actually gives you a reason to want to run a pure Unholy deck, or even 2 Unholy Runes. Before, honestly speaking, Unholy Death Knight was basically just a worse Frost Death Knight where you didn't have access to all the powerful tools that Frost Death Knight usually has access to. They both had a very similar game plan once people figured out a more minion-based Frost Death Knight deck was really powerful, and this should introduce a little bit more variety between the Unholy and Frost Death Knight types of decks. Alright, let's rush into the new Demon Hunter cards. The first one being a Rush the Stage, a 3 cost spell that draws 2 rush minions. They cost 1 less. So we will be seeing a lot of rush support with some of these later cards for Demon Hunter that also got revealed. However, if you are going to try to use this card, it might actually just be best to use this in combination with Illidari Inquisitor, because you can actually just draw into both copies instantaneously and they'll both cost 7, which means you can actually play one of them down on the same turn you draw into both of them if it is turn 10 or later. You could also in theory use this in combination with the Outcast Giant that we got in the previous set, where it discounts itself by 1 per Outcast card you actually play down. We didn't really have a way to search that card out before, but that is a new way you could if you really felt like doing it. There's actually a lot of possibilities with a card like this. Drawing 2 for 3 is always really nice, especially if it gives a little bit of mana cheat, especially given the next card, which is going to be Snakebite, a 2 cost 1 attack, 1 HP, Naga, Rush, Battlecry, gain +1/+1 for each friendly minion that died this turn. So this is what I meant by having a little bit of mana cheat could go a long way with rush minions. If you have a way to discount some already really cheap rush minions, you can rush them into your opponent's own minions and then slam something like this down, and thus making her incredibly big. The nice thing about this card in particular is it is already a low cost minion, so you in theory could use her as a way to buff up the second copy of her in your hand, depending on how you're actually building the deck. We are going to be losing some cards that do give you 1/1 rush minions. However, we do still have the summon 3 Illidari Initiate card that I can't remember its name right now that could easily be used in combination with this card. That would make this card no matter what a 4/4. However, that does require 7 mana, so it might not be the strongest in the world. If we see some additional rush minion generation off of Demon Hunter in some of the later cards that haven't been revealed yet, or maybe in a mini set or something, then this card could be incredibly powerful. We also do have the advantage that Infuse is also currently in rotation, which means you can use a lot of the rush minions you can randomly generate through some cards in combination with this. The only downside, again, is the fact that you won't be able to use the no minion cards to generate those additional rush minions, but this should be a decent card and may or may not be the perfect payoff for a rush Demon Hunter deck. And speaking of a really good payoff, the next card is going to be Halveria Darkraven. I probably butchered that name, but it is what it is. She is a 4 cost 4 attack, 3 HP minion with rush. After a friendly rush minion attacks, give your minions +1 attack. So this can easily be compared to good old Rokara, who is going to be rotating out of standard once this actually comes out. However, the one downside with this card is the fact that it costs 4 compared to Rokara's original 3. First thing that comes to mind is this plus Illidari Inquisitor. However, that does rely on you to have the Inquisitor actually survive an additional turn, but every time those Inquisitors are going to attack, since they can attack twice per turn, then a card like this is going to make them gain 2 attack, which could, in theory, 2-turn kill your opponent depending on how many Inquisitors you actually have on the board. I don't know if this is going to be the strongest in the end. However, if we did lower the cost maybe by 1 and then lower the attack and HP by 1, then I think this card would be a lot more playable. But as it currently stands, it's just a really nice aggro tool, but it is a little bit boring. Though the artwork is incredibly cool looking, as it is our first Demon Hunter Worgen, I'm pretty sure at this point. So let's get on to the next card, which is going to be Security, which is the perfect card for all the previous cards. It's a 2-cost spell that summons 2 1/1 Illidaris with Rush. Outcast, summon 1 more. So you can't use the no minion tech if you are going to be using a lot of these rush support cards. However, you can use this instead. It being 2 mana is perfect because it does basically power creep one spell that we already have in standard that summons 3/3 Illidari Initiates. However, this is a little bit better if you can always guarantee the Outcast. The only downside is it does dilute the pool for a Outcast Demon Hunter deck where you might want to just gain really consistent draw power. But if you're going to be trying to make a rush Demon Hunter deck work, this is the perfect card for you and is probably the perfect 2-drop that the deck actually needed, because if any of these minions survive, you can easily snowball on the following turn. All right, now it's time for the Mage Legendary. Infinitizing the Maxitude, a 2-cost spell that discovers a spell. Finale, return this to your hand. So we are going to be losing a lot of the hero power synergy that was in the rotation, which made you always want to ping your opponent's face or ping something on the board whenever you had 2 leftover mana. However, this card kind of replaces that idea, because if the last year of Hearthstone has taught us anything, we should know by now that having 2 mana left over as mage isn't the hardest thing in the world to accomplish. This card can easily be compared to the 6-cost legendary from Priest that gives you the Vision of Darkness in your hand that you can just keep repeating it. However, this card allows you to actually use it on turn 2, making it incredibly powerful that way, and you can use it in combination with the new Millhouse card to discount all the random spells that you will be generating to 0, ramping up from there. There's a lot of possibilities for this card. It also allows you to just have a lot of answers that your opponent might not be able to deal with. It could be a nice return to a very grind state game for Mage, which is something that has kind of been missing for quite a while now. And now time for the Hunter cards. The first one is Aerosmith, which is a reference to a band. A 2-cost 2 attack 3 HP Naga that after you cast a spell, deal 1 damage to the lowest health enemy. We don't really have any ways to give poisonous to this minion, which makes it a little bit worse than it actually had a possibility of having poisonous. However, this does allow you to maybe ping a minion on your opponent's board for 1 additional damage, or even your opponent's face, depending on how low they actually are. We are going to be losing a lot of the direct damaging spells that Hunter does have access to in the new rotation, along with the questline, which makes a card like this a little bit less useful. But there is enough Naga support that was really good in Sunken City that Naga Hunter may or may not come back from the dead. Because honestly, the only thing keeping that deck from being meta relevant was the fact that there were quite a few other meta relevant Hunter decks, and most of those are going to go away. Okay, now for the next card, which is going to be Bunch of Bananas, a 1-cost spell that gives a minion +1/+1, 3 bananas left. So this is basically twin spell, except you have 3 casts instead of 2. A 1/1 stat increase for 1 mana isn't actually that bad, especially since you can repeat this multiple times. And you could use it in combination with the previous card to keep buffing it up to make it a little bit harder to actually kill, and doing 1 damage to your opponent's face each time you do, or to get rid of one of their key minions depending on what turn you're going to use this on. I don't think this is super meta warping, however it does allow you to have a lot of advantage off of a very cheap spell pretty consistently, which might make it see some little bit of play. Now for the next card, which is going to be Barrel of Monkeys. If we have a bunch of bananas, who are we going to feed them to? It's the monkeys. A 2-cost spell that summons a 1/4 monkey with taunt. 3 monkeys left. Very similar to the previous card. Basically a better silverback gorilla, which was the 3-cost minion that was in the classic set. But that card in particular was actually pretty bad back in classic Hearthstone, so I don't know how playable this one is going to be. However, it does have a few advantages. First of all, it doesn't actually just eat up after the first initial use, which means you can get 2 additional taunts out of a card like this that's protecting your face or key minions that you might want to. It also does allow you to use some of the beast synergy without relying on too many beasts within your deck itself, as it will make those cards a lot more consistent compared to what they normally would be if you were just running a low minion count when it comes to beasts. And the other thing is it works pretty well with the new weapon, Jungle Jammer, a 4-cost 4 attack 2 durability weapon. Death Rattle, summon a random 1-cost beast, cast spells while equipped to improve. So this plus the previous card will always be a 4-cost beast. If you somehow manage to get it to a 9-cost beast, you have a 1 in 3 chance of generating King Crush. It's worth mentioning here, I don't know how consistent you're going to be able to do it, but between the previous 2 cards, you do have a bunch of cheap spells that don't go away after the initial cast. This puts you through a very cool resource loop where this can keep getting buffed up. Sure, you're going to have to wait to play those cards until turn 4, but I do think there is a deck here. We haven't seen the legendaries for Hunter in this set, so who knows, we might be in an even better position once we do see those. We also do have a bunch of cheap spells in the form of things like tracking or any of the arcane spells in order to try to make more use of this, or even the cards that will buff up your minions if you have them too. There's a lot of possibilities with this neat little spell-based package that Hunter may or may not actually want to use. I'm actually kind of curious if they'll end up being a no minion Hunter deck once again, where you're just randomly generating a bunch of beasts off of cards like this, or even things like the Wild Seeds. It's a really cool archetype that I like to explore quite a bit. It was one of my favorite decks back in the day when we had Yasharas and Barnes, and that should shock no one. That is the type of deck I tend to gravitate towards. But either way, I'm actually kind of excited for all three of these Hunter cards, as it should be an interesting little deck to try out. Okay, now it's time for the Paladin cards. The first one is going to be quite funky. The Funk Been a 3-cost to attack 2 HP Murloc. Divine Shield. Your minions with Divine Shield have +2 attack. So we're going to be actually losing a lot of the Divine Shield synergy when the new rotation happens. However, it does look like they're going to be printing enough to replace it. This card is perfect for some type of weird dude infused Divine Shield synergy deck. The reason I mention a dude paladin in that jumble sentence of a deck is the fact that Lotharion is actually going to be rotating back in, thus allowing you to always have Divine Shield on all the recruits that you actually place down, and this card in theory would just allow you to make them scale up pretty quickly if your opponent leaves any of them on board. Between this and some of the later cards, it does look like a Divine Shield deck will be incredibly powerful for Paladin. Speaking of some very powerful Divine Shield synergy, Jitterbug, which is a 4-cost 4-attack 3 HP beast. After a friendly character loses Divine Shield, draw 1 card. So this plus the new legendary spell allows you to actually just keep drawing cards from your deck every time you do attack with your own hero. We haven't actually seen the Paladin weapon, I don't think, at this point, so we don't know exactly how it's going to scale. But a lot of the divine synergy that we have been seeing should make this card incredibly powerful. And it's actually kind of funny because you can run a pure Divine Shield Paladin deck where you're trying to abuse cards like this and things like Curator in order to get a very menagerie board. There's a lot of possibilities because they are printing a lot of different types of minions with Divine Shield synergy, and I can't wait to see how that deck evolves from where it currently is. Now for the last card, which is going to be Spotlight, which is a 2-cost tradable spell that has the holy tag, convert a friendly Divine Shield into a 5/5 elemental. On curve, this is absolutely insane. If you manage to actually put down the Sanguine Soldier on turn 1 and then place this down, you have 7/6 worth of stats on turn 2, which most decks can't actually handle, which may or may not become a huge problem in the future, and I don't understand why they printed this at 2 mana. There's no way this card isn't absolutely broken. It's just so easily abusable in so many Paladin decks without having to rely on running too much Divine Shield synergy. I get it, they're trying to push Divine Shield synergy because it's the closest thing Paladin actually has to a class mechanic, even though it is a neutral keyword. Either way, I do think this card and a lot of the previous Paladin cards that we just went over will see a lot of play, as they don't require you to change current decks too much that are already incredibly strong and just makes them way more powerful. Paladin isn't actually losing too much compared to a lot of the other classes in this new rotation. Sure, you're missing Cariel, but you are getting a Divine Shield that can be replenished every individual turn. Alright, so those were all the cards revealed today. Let me know what deck you're most looking forward to using out of the bunch. I think I'm going to say the Charge, Death Rattle, Death Knight deck is probably where I want to test out first, but who knows. Some of these other cards do look like a lot of fun, and like always, if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, bye-bye.